Welcome back, everybody, coast to coast. This Week in America online, thisweekinamerica.us. The simple, powerful book, A Child's Guide to Wisdom, is being called a must for every home library and a valuable resource for organized youth training and development programs. The book is designed to serve as a guide for parents in the transferal of wisdom to their children, a collection of 50 key principles in the form of easy-to-remember, common-sense definitions, intended to build character in your child by instilling in him or her important qualities that will result in a life of wisdom and success. Everton Robinson is author of A Child's Guide to Wisdom. He's worked for over 38 years in church leadership as a minister, elder, worship leader, and steward, and has shared the principles of wisdom through his work with various church-based organizations. Reverend Robinson has mentored a variety of spiritual leaders. His marriage enrichment programs have been instrumental in saving many marriages. Currently an ordained deacon in the African Methodist Episcopal Church in Los Angeles, also an investment advisor with Fit Planning Group, an entrepreneur in the e-commerce business space, a songwriter, family man residing in Buena Park, California, and author of A Child's Guide to Wisdom, Reverend Everton Robinson, our guest on This Week in America. Reverend Robinson, welcome to the program. It's great to have you with us. Looking forward to this.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I love this book, and I wish as our kids were growing up that we had something like this that we could use and instill some of this knowledge in them at a young age. Let's go back and talk about the inspiration. As I understand, what your wife sort of encouraged you to do this based on your interaction with your twin daughter. She thought, hey, you got to write a book here. You're onto something.
That's correct. Actually, when at the age of 32, I discovered the word wisdom, and realized that this is as a way of life. This would be great. And so I started thinking about that, and I said, okay, I'm going to learn wisdom, and then as soon as I have my children, and as soon as they can speak, I'm going to start to implant the principles in them. Even if they didn't understand the words, I knew that later on they would grow into the words, and that's what we've done with our children.
You know, and that's an interesting part. It's a book, but your children don't have to be of age to read, do they? As you say, as soon as your daughters would comprehend what you were saying, you started the message transferring to them.
That's correct. That's correct. They would always ask me to read them a story. So in the read them a story time, I would pick a principle, and then I would say the principle, and they had to repeat it every night. Since I was a captive audience anyway, I figured if I'm going to read them a story that's not really going to benefit that much, they're going to learn these principles. The other reason I started doing that was because we used to watch the Lion King. The Lion King had just come out when they were born.
Yes.
And when they were about 2 years old, we used to watch it all the time. And one day I heard them repeating verbatim every word, every line that everybody said in the movie. And I said, if they can remember that, they can remember these principles. So that's what I started to.
The book is called A Child's Guide to Wisdom. The author is Everton Robinson. You'll find the book available at bookventure.com in the bookstore, of course, at Amazon. You can link on directly to information on the book by going to our website, thisweekinamerica.us. You start the book off with a key question. This is really interesting. If as a child you had the wisdom you now possess an adult, do you believe your life would be different? And when you ask yourself that question, the obvious answer for most people would be, of course it would be. You're giving us the tools to impart on our children, so they're growing up with this wisdom that for some of us it took decades before we understood this.
Yes, yes. The thing about it, the interesting thing about it is this. I ask myself, which would I rather have, a wise child or an educated child? And the conclusion is, everybody that I ask the same question, they say, I would prefer to have a wise child. And absolutely, because a wise child will seek education, but not every educated child will seek wisdom.
Yeah, and you talk about that, and you begin to think about that. You see people that graduate sometimes with multiple degrees, highly educated, yet the choices they make, the wisdom they use, gets them into trouble, or at least prevents them from attaining the success they're after. So the wisdom is really a key part of that, isn't it?
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. And if you think about all the great people that you admire, they all have one thing in common, and that's wisdom. And yet, wisdom, we have schools of higher education. We don't have schools of wisdom, and yet we want our children to be wise. And so I just thought just a simple system where you're gonna spend time with them anyway. If you have a way that you can just one word at a time, just keep on repeating and repeating. After a while, they'll pick it up. What I used to do is, as I started just calling and repeating, and then after a while, they knew it. So I would say, well, what is this? What is wisdom? And they'll tell me. What is knowledge? What is understanding? What is transparency? All those things they could tell me. They didn't understand what they were talking about, but it didn't matter. As they grew, I could call on the principal when I needed to correct them. I called on the principal, and they would tell me the principal, and then I said, "Now, are you doing this?" And so it minimized a lot of the confrontation because they had wisdom to rely on.
You know, it's interesting. You talk a lot about repetition and you talk about research that's been done. The power of repetition is really a key to the success of basically everything we learn, isn't it?
It's absolutely, absolutely. And they say that there are physical neuropaths that are formed in the brain as a result of repetition. And so this is it. I used to say that I was brainwashing them, but really everybody's in the brainwashing business.
Exactly.
It's a matter of who's gonna wash your brain. So I washed their brain with the principles that they could call on later on.
Yeah, it's interesting as you're watching television, reading a book, a magazine, a newspaper, whatever. Everybody is there with the washcloth, trying to sort of get into your mind and to paint something positive in their direction. The book we're talking about is A Child's Guide to Wisdom by Everton Robinson. Mentioned for the younger kids. For the older kids, you've got something interesting too. You've got a compensation program in there that's another very important element that you enter into the picture.
Absolutely, absolutely. I wanted the children to link wisdom with reward. I wanted to know that wisdom pays, and so I set it up as a compensation system. So with our children, we never gave them an allowance. Whenever they wanted money, we told them, okay, just quote me this many principles, and you'll get the money equivalent to that. And so when they were little, we gave them a dime. Every time they would quote the principle from memory, we would give them a dime, we'd put it in a little piggy bank. And so by doing that, when they got from 1 to 21, that means that they repeated it 21 times. They pretty much mastered the principle. And at the bottom of the page, I had a certification that I would write just saying that they have mastered this principle. Then I give them a bonus. So I wanted to link wisdom with money.
And it's very
Because
successful.
That's what we do with education. We educate. We link education with money.
Yes.
So I wanted to link wisdom with money.
And you mentioned the perseverance bonus, and that sort of a parent can establish how they want to do that, what type of money they want to attach to that. The certification section is interesting as well because the child actually gets something. They get the money, but they also get recognition in the form of a certificate.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I've also I've designed a program so that you can actually download the principle on certificate paper. And I have this idea to use it like in preschools and in regular schools. They have a wall of wisdom. And then when the child masters a principle, they can print that certificate, put it up on that wall, because you want to value wisdom. Because at the end of the day, you want that child to embrace wisdom as a way of life. That's what I have. If I haven't done anything else in my life, I am happy to say that my children, my daughters, have embraced wisdom as their way of life, and they will carry that forward. That's my legacy.
Yeah, and talk about the reaction of your daughters. I mentioned this started at an early age, and you feel now these are really well-adjusted children. And you feel that's because basically this program has really instilled in them ethics, a sense of value, hasn't it?
Yes, it has. As a matter of fact, when they used to go out to their little sleepovers with their daughters, I used to tell them, now, You are the head and not the tail. You're the top and not the bottom because I've taught you wisdom. So therefore, you don't follow, you lead. And so when their friends would go and do mischievous things, they wouldn't do them. And your friends called them goody two shoes.
Yes. Yeah, I remember that very well when you're in that category. A Child's Guide to Wisdom, Everton Robinson, our guest on the program. Book available at bookventure.com in the bookstore. Amazon, you can link on directly by going to our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Let's talk about the collection. It's a collection basically of 50 key principles. How do you go about deciding on 50 and these 50? What was part of the selection process?
I started out with only 20. And these are principles that I had learned from seminars, from audio that I'd listened to of wise people. Because I've always been interested in what wise people had to say. So I had about 20 principles. And then I sent it to the publisher, and the publisher said, no, we need more. You can't just do 20 principles and make a book out of it. So they said, well, we need you to do at least 50. And so that was the beginning of the 50. And so I had to go deep down inside and start thinking, okay, what other principles do I want to instill in these children?
Let's talk about the format of the book. I mentioned the 50 key principles, and you don't have 3 or 4 pages devoted to each of these. You just have basically a sentence there, which is part of the process. Let's start, for example, accountability. That's at the beginning of the book. Why is that important, and what is the line you have, the repetition that the child would go through?
So when I use this principle, what I do is I start out with the child. I say, okay, accountability is being good for your word, and then I get into a little more definition. I tell them, so when you say you're going to do something, you follow through. You do what you say you're going to do, and so I just said the word and they repeat it. Said the sentence and they repeat it. Said it, and then later on, when I had to call them to accountability, I would say, well, what is the principle of accountability? They would tell me. And then I would say, now, did you follow through on your word? And so now the principle made sense.
Yeah, sort of a real-life application for what you were talking about. The book is A Child's Guide to Wisdom by Everton Robinson. I mentioned this is a must-have for parents. It's a must-have for study groups. The book's available at bookventure.com in the bookstore, of course, at Amazon as well. It's interesting what I understand that your fascination, this concept of wisdom, came out of your study of the Bible. As you were reading the Bible, you got this thirst and this understanding of wisdom.
Yes, I was reading the book of James, chapter 1, and I ran across verse 5 that says, if any man lacks wisdom, he should ask God, and basically that God would give him abundantly if he didn't doubt. And so when I ran across that scripture, I stopped right there. I got on my knees and I said, Lord, according to your word right here, you said that if I lack wisdom, I should ask you and you would give it to me abundantly if I didn't doubt. So I'm asking you to give me wisdom. In the name of Jesus, amen. I got up and I said, just to eliminate any thought of doubt in my mind, I said, from now on, I'm wise. And I still believe that. I believe that God gave me wisdom right there. But after that, I got a thirst for anything having to do with wisdom.
And the ability to pass that along, especially to young people when they're most probably receptive for the message that you were about to give them, especially in the way you decide to give it to them. We got a couple minutes left in the program, going by way too quickly, but there are 2 important points that you make. One is this really sort of an interactive program as well, isn't it? You don't just hand the book to the child and say, go read this and we'll see you in a couple of hours. You really need that interaction with them.
Absolutely. It doesn't work otherwise. First of all, the parent must embrace wisdom as a way of life. In my family, that's what I talk about. My wife is very wise. And so we as a couple embrace wisdom as a way of life. And so therefore it became important to us that in our interaction with our children, we would talk about wisdom. So again, since you're a captive audience anyway, especially when they're young, they always want your attention. You have about a 5-year window when you can pass your values on to the children. And so this is a very simple format to do it. And at the same time, motivate them with the money.
And the other aspect of that that's very important is you practice the principles of wisdom that you're talking about, that you teach in the book, A Child's Guide to Wisdom. You mentioned that with your children with accountability. It's real important, isn't it, to tie these words into like real life experiences?
Absolutely. So in our correction process, that's what we did. And also, as we watched TV together and we saw principles that work, we would say, what is that principle? They could tell us. Or if we would see situations, even driving in the street, driving down the street, we would see situations and circumstances, and we would say, what principle is being violated? And they could tell us. So it became more than just a book that you just gave it to them. You had to get involved. So we grew in wisdom as we passed wisdom on to them.
It's interesting that interaction that you develop with the child at a very young age. A Child's Guide to Wisdom, Everton Robinson, our guest on the program. I mentioned this is really a guide for parents. Talk about the response that you're getting, because an individual parent could do this. This is something a church group or a Bible study group or even a book club group could benefit from as well.
Absolutely. I've had parents come back to me and they've reported about their children and the way that they're growing up and how proud they are because the children could repeat those principles and they could show how they could apply the principles on a day-to-day basis.
One of the words you have, one of the 50 key principles, is wisdom. Talk about that, because you actually teach that as well. Overall, that's sort of the theme for everything you're teaching them, but you've got the wisdom itself in there as a word.
That's correct. So that's the first one I taught them. Wisdom is knowing what to do and doing it when you are supposed to do it, and knowing what not to do and not doing it. That's what I taught them. And so they knew that one backwards and forwards.
Some of the 50 key principles, I mentioned accountability, character, faith, humility, laughter, love, obedience, optimism, politeness, self-esteem, wisdom that we talked about, work ethic. These are principles. Adults should read this book as well, don't you think? There's a lot that we can learn from that. I mean, it's a very simple presentation, and we sometimes get caught up in our world, and suddenly if we're forgetting about humility, we forget about laughter, the power of just stopping and having a good laugh from time to time. So if we're listening when we're reading these to the children, the adult's going to learn something as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Most of us as adults have not even defined these things to ourselves. And so as we are the biggest learner in this situation will be the parent.
Was that the case with you when you put these together, went back, and you had this thirst for wisdom before, but I would assume that was a renewed thirst for wisdom as you were putting these key principles together?
Absolutely. It forced me to think about what these words meant. And so as a result, it began to work on me even more because I had to define.
The book is A Child's Guide to Wisdom. Everton Robinson is our guest on the program. Book is available at bookventure.com in the bookstore. You'll find it, of course, at Amazon. Link on directly with the Bookventure site by going to our website, thisweekinamerica.us. Reverend Robinson, it's been a pleasure. I loved having a chance to read the book and talk about it on the program. Excellent job. You're shaping a number of young lives out there. Congratulations on the success of the book, and thank you for being with us on the program.
Thank you, Rick. I enjoyed it very much, and anytime.
Would love to do it again. So much more to talk about. A Child's Guide to Wisdom. Everton Robinson, our guest on the program. Information, of course, at our website, thisweekinamerica.us. And we're back after these messages.